Yeah, you're saying a lot of things that are making me aware that you must have been on this journey for a while now. When did you start becoming very spiritual? Were you always like that? Were you religious when you were growing up?
No, my mom specifically did not give us any religious training because she was like raised in Midwest Texas in the Southern Baptist Bible Belt.
Okay.
And my grandma was super, super religious. So she went to church every five days out of the week. So my mom got raised up there, and it was during the 60s, when Martin Luther King was talking about civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
And, people were like, hey, we're not doing things the right way. We need to change. And here my mom is in this little Midwestern town going to church with people who are like all about God. And then there's a bathroom for colored people and there's a bathroom for white people. My
In the
mom's like,
church.
that's not right. So my mom lost faith in the church. Not to say she lost faith that there's a God, but she lost faith in the church as a way of accessing it. So when she raised me, she didn't raise me with any religion. She specifically said, I will not raise you with any programming. So it's up
Wow.
to you to find your way.
Interesting.
So yeah, I found my way in nature.
Hmm.
I like being outside.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's your connection there to
Yeah,
the
definitely
divine.
earth-based. Earth, but I wouldn't say I was calling it that. At first it was like I liked to do art. I like to create art. So I'd be outside in nature painting landscapes and like allowing the environment to influence me to create something beautiful from the beauty I was seeing. That was my first real connection with the divine. And I didn't even know that's what it was. I just was enjoying being in nature and painting. And so later on, after my first sort of dark night of the soul, where I got to the end of my rope and was like, hey, my life isn't working the way it is. I opened up. I said, well, there's got to be another way besides weekly psychotherapy sessions and not feeling pills. So what's that way? I'm going to open up, to that. And within about 6 months, I got connected with earth-based spirituality teacher here in Austin. And I started studying about the four agreements, and which I think that book should be handed to every third grader. Like
Can you
every
elaborate?
third grader needs to know that book.
I don't know
It,
that
the,
book.
the four, oh my gosh, you would love this book. The Four Agreements is a book by Don Miguel Ruiz, and it's a Toltec teaching. And he's very clearly explains the four agreements you can live your life by is super, makes it so you can be the artist of your dream. So one of the agreements is be impeccable with your word. The
Mhm.
word is our power of creation. So we must learn to be impeccable with it because we're creating with it all the time.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
next agreement is don't take anything personally. It's not about you. And yet it is. So there's
Mhm.
like that distinction. So, because I'm creating with my word, so it is about me, but don't take it personally because it's not about me. So
Mhm.
it's that identity question. So that's a profound one. Don't make assumptions because our minds are constantly making assumptions. They're trained to make leaps of logic and to connect things that aren't really actually related. And then do your best because that takes care of the judge that's always judging us constantly for doing it wrong. So those four agreements are powerful. It's a little book. It's deceptively simple. And I read it the first time and I thought, this makes complete sense. And then I
Mhm.
tried to do it. I found myself challenged
Right.
to actually do it.
Oh, this is
And so
easy.
yeah, like it's written at the third grade level, so it makes perfect sense to an adult. But it's a very challenging, it's simple, but it's not easy. It's one of those you got to dig in to actually live your life this way. So I read that book 35 times front to back to reprogram my mind.
35. That's a big number, but that's a lot of number. That's a big number as well.
I just kept reading it over. I had a busy mind. I needed to, reprogram it. So that's what I
Repetition
did.
is the key, really, isn't it? In these kinds of things, habit building. Yeah.
It is. It's 90 days of a new habit, and it takes some willpower. Is the willpower to put it in place. It's the willpower to resist what has been, to forge the new path, which
Yeah.
is actually the true path, but it's just got covered up by a bunch of domestication and conditioning and kind of false ideas.
Mm. Yeah, and it's good. So it's good in that sense that your mother didn't put you on that path of kind of like indoctrination. I mean, I'm not against religion. To a certain degree, I'm a little cautious about it. But I would say that if you find power and faith in religion, then I'm totally for that, and that's fine with me. But I'm not religious myself. Uh, but it's good that you were given, because it is indoctrination to a certain degree, isn't it? I mean, when you really look at it on paper, this is what we believe, and we're going to teach you what we believe, and you're going to believe that too, and you'll be part of the group, and then we'll be bigger and stronger. And I think a lot of churches work that way. So for you to have, because I had to unlearn a lot of that stuff. My mother will kill me if she hears this because she is a devout Christian, and my father is too, and they know my stance on the whole thing. But I did have to unlearn a lot of that stuff, and it really weighs you down if you don't resonate with it. If you really don't resonate with something and you feel like you have to believe it and that's the truth, that's when the clashes start. You're like, you don't know what to do with yourself. So yeah,
That's very true.
Yeah.
That's like, I think that part of the reason why that doesn't work is because it's conformity. You're trying to apply conformity to something externally, to something that's a very personal, divine conversation. So it takes away the sacredness of the connection that a person has with their creator to try to tell them how they should be having it. It's actually a violation on so many levels. Now, religion can have a positive impact in offering a pathway for discovery, like a doorway for people who are not yet sure how to find that doorway. It's just like when I'm teaching a class in earth-based spirituality, I'm really aware that I'm offering a doorway, a pathway, suggestions, things that I followed that helped open the doorway for me. I invite other people in the group to share things that open the doorway for them. And like all of these podcasts, for example, like listening to all these podcasts and my podcast, Soul Nectar Show, I like to have these conversations too, because I like to offer lots of little doorways so that you can find the doorway that resonates for you through someone else's experience. We are mirrors of each other. Mm-hmm. But I do believe it's a fear-based construct to have conformity, because why does the conformity need to be there? Because I'm really not sure about myself if I believe any of this anyway. So if more people reinforce to me and validate for me that this is true, then I can believe it more. Yeah. But like, I don't know it inside. If I knew it inside, I wouldn't need to convince anybody else of anything.
That's what I think too. And believe me, I've been back and forth on the topic of religion for a while now. And, studying the humanities is such an eye-opening thing, because you start to see perspectives from different cultures, from different times, and you really can put together a better picture of, the whole, I guess, what is religion. In essence, it is something that, and I don't want to digress from our conversation because we're talking about your book essentially, but I agree with you. I think that everything that is true, I think we know that somehow from birth, but we just maybe forget it along the way, or we've kind of not practiced it. And it's interesting, when I came to read your book, I was like, oh, this woman is very spiritual. Like I didn't realize it was a very spiritual book. And I think it's obvious at the first, the title, and then obviously when you go into the buffalo, what's the name of it again? It's
White Buffalo Calf Woman.
That's the White Buffalo Calf Woman. I was like, what is the White Buffalo Calf Woman? So can you explain, first of all, what is the mother wound? The title is Love is Fierce, Healing the Mother Wound. That's the title of your book. But can you explain for people listening, what is the mother wound? I had to look this up.
Yes, absolutely. The mother wound essentially is multidimensional construct. However, so let's go to the biggest picture. The biggest picture of the mother wound is the idea that we're separate and not loved by our creator. That's the biggest picture, that somehow we're unworthy of love. Now, as you go into your own biological mother, it's that replication of that idea in the relationship with your biological mother, that somehow you're not loved or not wanted, not appreciated, uplifted, like it just didn't hit the spot, so to speak. there's like a gap. It just doesn't totally hit the mark. Like, how come I don't feel completely cherished by this person who gave birth to me? How come I don't feel completely understood? So it's that feeling that there's something missing in this connection, and you're not really seeing me or understanding me, and you should, because you're the one who brought me to life. So why don't you understand me? If you don't, who's going to? So it's that pain of that gap. And on the bigger sense, it's generational. So it's thousands of years of living according to the patriarchy, and not to bash the patriarchy, we're not bashing men or anything like that, but it's just that we've been living from the masculine mind, and it's time to move back into the feminine heart and balance it with the mind. So there's been a big sort of punishing of the feminine over the last thousands of years, punishing the feminine, kind of controlling it, owning it, making a sort of trophy of it, and then owning and, basically like punishing it if it doesn't do what you want. It's like, well, you're not doing what I want, so I'm going to punish you now. That all of that experience is inherited by every single human being alive. Because why? Because we're born in a woman's body, inside her consciousness, inside her womb. So the idea that you could somehow escape the effects of your actions, let's say like there's a father, let's say that there's a man that beats his wife, and then he thinks, well, it's not going to have any effect on my children. And yet it does, like immediately, instantly does, because now the wife, all the feelings she has in her body about herself from being beaten, now she's got a baby forming inside the womb who's instantly being informed of her entire life experience because it's being birthed inside her consciousness. Now also is being programmed with all of those patterns and ideas. And so we pass it on from generation to generation to generation. And you can see how the appreciation of life on the planet even is affected, because it seems like, if your heart's awakened even a little bit, you might ask the question, how could we have some people on the planet that don't have food and water, and other people on the planet that have so much they can't possibly consume it in their entire lifetime? How can we allow that condition to exist in humanity? How can that be okay with us? Mm-hmm. Even if your heart's a little open, you start asking questions like, how come fracking's okay when it destroys the water supply? That seems like it's bad for us and bad for the planet. How come it's okay to tear down the jungle? So you start to ask these questions if your heart's even just a little bit open. But the thing is, most of our hearts are not that open because of all this violent conditioning for the last thousands of years.
Right.
It's easier not to feel it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, on an individual basis, it's, I'll give you an example of maybe helping to somewhat agree with what you're saying on one level. I'm part of mental health groups on social media. I think I mentioned this in the last episode as well, but just to summarize, like it's difficult to see the suffering that much and know that, well, you can do something about it. But if you do, you kind of feel like, well, I have to keep doing it. It's a strange thought. It's like, for me personally, and I try my best by putting out content that helps people. I think what I'm referring to is, the more I spend there trying to talk to people, and I even tell them, look, you can message me. If you feel like you're suicidal, message me. We can talk, at least you've got someone. But, and I had to leave the groups because I felt so heavy that I wasn't able to actually help everyone I saw. And it was in the back of my mind all the time. It was like, this person's suffering, this person's suffering, this person, but I got to do this, and this by this time. And I can't do that. And I just left because I knew it would weigh me down. I don't really know how to extrapolate that, but I would imagine it's possible. There's a lot of people out there who have wealth and resources, and they're trying their best to figure out, how the heck am I gonna, there's some good podcasts actually right now that you can listen to. Sam Harris talks a lot about this on his Making Sense podcast. I'm not sure if you know about that, but he does talk with philanthropists, people who've studied the science of philanthropy. And you could donate $100 to a charity, a local charity, and you could do some good, but you could literally 100 times the impact by donating the same $100 to another charity that is trying to do something else with the money. And this is really kind of like going down to the root of like, understanding where does my time and my money and my resources make the most impact. If that's essentially what we want to do, help people in the greatest capacity, I think thinking about things like from a scientific perspective can give people a bit more reassurance that they can help beyond their means. Like if you donated $10 today to, create malaria-laced nets, anti-malaria laced nets, you could save hundreds of lives with just $10, as opposed to giving it to someone on the street and then they go and, spend it or waste it or whatever. So yeah, it's an interesting, fascinating topic. How can we help more and not feel like we're not doing enough?
Well, the essential linchpin in this whole thing is the fact that really the ultimate way that we're going to change the planet is that more and more people step into their sovereignty and their connection with their soul self, their higher power, whatever that looks like for them. And that is what informs people of the next action that they can take to make the greatest impact, right? That's the highest way, is that as people are connected with that knowing self within them, that knowing self knows the next step that person should be doing to create a greater impact. Now, there's this matrix, though, that keeps us from stepping into that. And that matrix is the victim, rescuer, perpetrator triangle, the disempowerment triangle. So, in America, I notice how we're so fascinated with the rescuers, like the superheroes, and everybody wants to be a superhero. Well, even the rescuer model, that is very disempowering for people, because it means that we need some superhero to come save us from ourselves. That the whole message is backwards. So it's actually, it creates more victims. If you need to be a rescuer, that means you need to have victims and perpetrators in order to rescue. So the whole matrix needs to be tossed out. And right. The ultimate truth is we step into the wholeness, the totality of our being, the shadows, the gifts, the potentials of each person. That's the more realistic way of living.
And that's not an easy thing to do, right? That's quite a tough, challenging, painful process of really learning your personal power, because you've always had it, right? You've always had that agency, that sovereignty, but you've been taught that you don't over time. I think I get what you're saying. I hear where you're coming from. Those superhero movies, as entertaining as they are, and I do watch them, I can see how damaging they can be if you take it from a different angle. Like I watch them and I try, just to use it as entertainment, but it has become part of the culture. It really has. And I think, you could even go as far as to say the repercussions are visible at levels of government, where now government has become the superhero. And now we are all being taken care of by the superhero because we are victims. I was having this conversation just the other day with someone. I don't really feel like government should be that powerful. I don't think it should be, taking care of us as if we're children to this degree. So yeah, it is a very difficult thing to do. I mean, that people are scared. So I can empathize too. If you tell someone in a roundabout or an indirect way, if you tell someone not to be a victim, they might get offended and they might feel, well, how do you know what my situation is? How can you tell me that I have the power when I don't, when I'm hurting, when I'm suffering? And it's tricky. I think there's a lot of work to be done there. Yeah.
There is. And so that work is healing the mother wound because it's healing, right? The disconnection between us and our creator, the idea that we're somehow separate, small, and powerless is just an idea born out of the separation with our creator self, with our mother, the one that birthed us. I mean, everything is fractals, right? So it's all fractals of the same thing. So on earth, we're born out of the mother's womb. Well, we're born out of the creator's womb, so this is all, it's all cycling. So we have to learn to, first of all, yes, people are afraid. People are feeling like victims. People are feeling like they need to be rescued. And why do they feel that way? Because they don't realize, or they haven't cultivated within their own life, the ability to be self-sustaining. When you're self-sustaining, a lot of things can happen outside of you. And yes, they're happening and they could cause discomfort, but ultimately you're not taken out of your power because they're happening.
What do you mean by self-sustaining? Are we talking like like an economical level here, or is it like a few different types of self-sustaining
Yeah, so
levels?
so along the journey of sovereignty towards sovereignty, there always is this part of the journey where you've got to realize you're self-sustaining. So meaning that you could be like monkey. You know, monkeys are so clever, and they can climb along the trees, and they'll always find a branch to land on. They let go of the last branch and they leap for the next one, and they're fearless about it. They don't like go, I got to hold on to this branch while I try to get the next one. No, they like leap and they go for the next branch and they catch one, right? So as we become like that, as we become agile, as we become courageous, as we become trusting, as we open our intuitive senses and we listen within to that divine source that's already inside of us. It didn't go anywhere. It's the one that's witnessing your whole life. So you wouldn't even be experiencing this without the witness. So as the witness is experiencing everything, you follow that intuition, that knowing, you become agile, and that helps you become self-sustaining. So it doesn't really matter like what's going on around you. It matters what's happening inside of you, because people have placed their confidence in the structures, external structures. If my 401k stays just like this, I'll be fine. If my house stays just like this, I'll be fine. If my marriage is, still stable like this and I keep it the same way, and then it dies in the process of me keeping it the same way for 20 years, but it's okay. It's dead, but it's still there, all of this false structure to try to create a sense of stability in a world that's essentially all built on change.
Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing that we can't control, is what changes when. It's the same in business. If you want to be in business for as long as possible, you have to be able to agile. You have to be able to change when the markets change, when the demand changes. And the reason why I asked you if it was like an economical level is because, this last year of having to, spend time alone and not be in a relationship has taught me self-sustaining skills emotionally and psychologically. And I would, say to a certain degree spiritually, because now I'm a lot more connected to, I suppose, the love that comes from within, the love that comes from other sources. If you knew what I was like more than a year ago, you would probably think that I need to spend some time alone, right? And I had that opportunity, and so that's some self-sustaining principles. They aren't necessarily just to do with money. I mean, it's nice if you're financially free, or if you have a nice income and a stable source of income. That's very powerful stuff. And I think when neither of us are saying, that's not important, but definitely just having that, like you said, the monkey jumping from the branch to branch. I can get behind that 100%. We're too scared. We're just too scared, I think, these days.
Well, we just haven't been taught, because I look back on the education my children received in school, and it's all based on testing and yes, right, yes, no answers. And did you get it right? Did you not get it right? Did you get a good grade? Did you get a bad grade? It's not about critical thinking. It's not about the unanswered, the question that actually can't be answered one specific way, right? So like, I was an English major, so there's no right answer. There's just your perspective, and can you make a good argument for your perspective? That's the whole thing with being an English major, or a lot of other of the liberal arts. You start to look at the scientific realms, and sort of everybody's trying to, the school system is trying to make a one size fits all system that can easy to handle a bunch of kids and put them through like this one system. Well, in the process of doing that, you've taken away their ability to know their own strengths, their ability to navigate their own strengths through the discomfort of not knowing the answer. That is a huge gift we need right now in our whole world, because we don't know the answers. Let's just face it. There's not one person on the planet today, I guarantee you, even Tesla, who could say, oh, I know exactly how we're going to repair the Earth's ecosystem, and I know exactly how we're going to repair all of our infrastructures so that we don't have any war anymore, and that everybody's fed. There's no way to know that. And if you say you do, you're sort of like being egotistical, because this is an evolution. When we're working with consciousness, when we're co-creating directly with consciousness, with this energy that birthed us on this planet, and with the earth herself, this divine mother energy herself, it's like Martin Luther King said, you only see the next step. You don't see the whole staircase, and you've got to keep stepping even though you don't see the whole staircase. You've got to courageously take that next step, whatever's calling forth in your heart. That's the journey we're on right now. So it's not predictable, which really bothers people who have been conditioned in a linear, predictable format. They don't know what to do.
Yes. You're talking a lot about, I think, when you've mentioned various points in this conversation, like the trips that you've made, or the lessons you've learned from maybe older books and texts, that's a very kind of ancestral tuition. What do you think it is that what do you think it is that our ancestors knew that we didn't? And how do we relearn that stuff?
Well, this is really interesting because what I recently was watching, I like to tune into astrology. Kai Pacha, I really love him. He does a weekly forecast. And he did this forecast where he was talking about the evolutionary stages of our humankind. And he was talking about when Jesus came, everybody was all fascinated by this great teacher, Jesus, this healer. And then, of course, very quickly, the ones that wanted power took that into their purview, right? Because this man's like having a lot of influence just by his natural state of godness, his natural essence coming, his I am presence coming forth. People are like resonating with this. It's waking them up. So then, of course, like he got manipulated, the whole thing got manipulated into this church format, right? So you see that, and you see that over time, people were starting to see hypocrisies within the church, and they lost their faith in that. Now we have the birth of science, and science is like, well, I'm going to go experiment and see what's true in the natural world, and I'm going to prove it. And then science wasn't really able to prove anything to back up spirituality for a really long time until about now, right? So there's this huge length of time that went by. And in the middle of that, people said, well, if we can't prove anything with science yet, we're kind of hanging out, trying to make science work. We're still not sure about this religion thing. So why don't we just be comfortable? So we set about being comfortable. So all that's different between us and our ancestors is that our ancestors were not comfortable. They did not know if they were going to have food on the table the next day. They did not know if they were going to be able to survive, if there was a disease, if they would overcome it. They didn't know that. So in the space of not knowing is the invitation of the divine to come in, and then that magical, that presence of the divine, and the synchronicity of like, oh my gosh, this miracle happened and my son recovered. That moment has been interrupted by all of our interference with the process.
Fascinating. I love what you just said, actually. Comfort can be a killer, right? It can really destroy.
Comfort lends a hand to fear.
Yeah. I think we're on our way back out. I mean, to something a little bit more reasonable, let's say, in terms of our own ability to empathize, to have patience, to have agency, to be that sovereign kind of person you're talking about. I want to believe, I don't know, but I want to believe we're on our way back into that. Like you said, there's a lot of study now on, even just what meditation can do for you if you meditate. How does it affect the brain? How does it affect the body? And the results are coming back. Oh, it's very positive, actually. So, there'll be a lot more people doing that now. And there are, I can see it when I talk to people. They're like, yeah, I meditate too. I'm like, really? You meditate?
That's good.
Yeah. Right. So I would like to think that we're on our way, but yes, but after, let's say, for example, let's take a timestamp. Let's say the Second World War. After the Second World War, I think, life just got really good, really fast. And that's been so destructive in terms of culture, that we find ourselves in a situation that we're in now, where people really genuinely don't carry that character we used to carry before, that faith. So, but sorry, but for you, you what got you on this journey in the first place? I assume you you got interested in these things because you went through something. I think that happens to most people. How was your childhood? How was the relationship you had with your parents?
So my early childhood, 0 to 5, was a bit traumatic in the sense that my natural father, he had a lot of psychological abuse from his mother because she was, kind of toting him along to hotels and having sex with men and leaving him in the hallway, and even leaving him for like a couple of days at a time in the hotel room by himself. I mean, just really a lot of mental illness going on there,
Right.
So that was his experience. So when my mom got pregnant with me, it's the 1960s. She's been told she's not going to be pregnant. She's with this wild guy who, has this history, and he's all about, free love and, the whole hippie movement and everything like that. And now she has a baby inside of her. Oops. This is not exactly what she witnessed growing up in Midwest Texas with a good Christian family, as like how you're supposed to like get pregnant with a child and have a family.
Right.
So within a year, my mom started seeing signs that even as a little baby, my natural father was being inappropriate with me, and was, some of his wounding from his childhood was coming out, and she could see that this could be very detrimental. And so my mom is actually quite a warrior of love. She left him because at that time you had to have proof of the abuse, like photographic evidence of the abuse, right, in order for the judge to do anything. And my mom's like, well, I'm not going to let that happen. And then something did happen. There was a moment when I was just over 1 where there was an incident in the bathtub. Something did happen, and my mom walked in on it. And that was my first moment where I lost my innocence. So, and I took on shame. I took on my mother's shame. So that's a transference that happens in family lines. It transfers from the mother into the child because of the shame of the situation. It's ancestral as well. So my mom took me away from him and married this other man who we thought was going to be so much better. And then he ended up being kind of a covert narcissist, right? So like really looks perfect on the outside, but then at home, he's a violent drunk. Oh. So we went through that pattern. There's also, another experience with a mother wound. So eventually, husband number 3, my dad, who was my dad from the time I was 5 until he passed away a few years ago, he was an amazing father, incredible father. He was the kind of man that when he walked in the room, people would just gravitate towards him to ask questions. They don't even know why they're gravitating towards him. He was the guy that he sat down on the couch and all the dogs piled on top of him, So that was my dad. And so all the beautiful teaching I got from my dad and the relationship, the way that I saw him respect my mother and care for her and love her, all of that demonstration made a big difference. And it didn't take away the early childhood traumas. And it couldn't take away that, because the moment we start having that first wound, when that first wound happens, like mine at 1 year old, when that first wound happens, what happens is that you lose a bit of your innocence. And as you lose that, it gets filled with this shame or this other ancestral energy that needs to pass down the line. That's how it works. And then in your little childhood brain starts to form connections to the reticular activating system and connecting points of information and building a story about who you are and who your mother is and who your father is and what life is like. It starts building that narrative of that story, and then it starts getting reinforced and attracting more and more and more of the same reality. And since most of us are unconscious about that, we don't know that's happening. So we can't interject to deflect or change it in the moment because we haven't had the tools until now. And so then you add psychotherapy in and weekly psychotherapy to talk about the unfolding drama, which is the same drama that was happening from the very beginning. It's just another version of it.
What
now,
when did you start?
It just
when
makes
did you start
this
doing
whole
that?
story. I started in psychotherapy when I was 15 because I had I was in my self-abuse patterns. And as soon as my sexuality erupted, like my self-abuse patterns really came out. And I would say that my mom and I were processing her relationship with her mother, because her relationship with her mother is very strict, wouldn't listen. That's not how they were in that age. They didn't talk to their children. They told them what to do. And if they didn't do it, they got a switch and you got beat until you did it. So that was kind of my mom's relationship with her mother. So we were processing that. And my mom was trying not to do that, But then she was doing other things, right? Because she hadn't had like an example of being truly loved until she met my dad, like deeply loved for
How
who
did she
she
deal
is.
with that? I'm not trying to take away from, but I am
Oh,
curious.
no.
How did she deal with the sudden change of, did she know how to accept it or?
No, my mom refused to marry my dad for like several years. We
Yeah.
were living with this man, but she was like, no, I'm not getting married again. I already messed up twice. I got these two men who abused me in different ways. And I just feel like marriage is the thing that brought it all on. And I don't feel safe. So my dad my dad was a master. He was just big rock of unconditional love. Like, he's just the best person alive. Brings tears to my eyes. But yeah. So he really taught us a lot.
Yeah.
He taught us a lot about love.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think it takes a person like that to be able to break through the layers of conditioning that have kind of tormented someone for so long. I've been in relationships, various different types of relationships. I've been in loving relationships, selfless relationships. I've been in selfish relationships, narcissistic ones. Both sides, by the way, not just my partner, but me
Yeah.
too.
I totally own my part too.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of healing is like, okay, well, I did that wrong and I did that wrong. So, it's, if you want to help someone, I think that the medicine has to be as strong as the poison, so someone who's really hurt needs a lot of love, like a lot of love. It's
so much love. Exactly. And that's what my dad was. He was such a demonstration of that. And my mom had so many wounds because she didn't feel loved, right? And then all this church stuff on top of it, and the religious wounding, and like telling you're going to go to hell if you don't do this, that, all these conditions in her brain, they're just so painful. And so my dad really, he was such a blessing. So when he passed away, well, let's just say I realized how much love glue he was holding in place things. He was holding our family together. And when he passed away, that dissipated, and I was faced with so much realization about things that were never healed, things I thought were done and they were not done. And my mom and I have had a chance to really, and my whole family has had a chance to see those patterns emerge. And we've had family bullying. We've had, just the range of really painful. I got outcast from the family, because I'm writing books and sharing messages, and that the family didn't want me to. So there was a lot that happened. Even with my own children, I felt very disrespected by my family with my children, like having my son over to dinner, but not inviting me, things like that.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And then having conversation around the dinner table about me while I'm not there in front of my son, things like that. So this is all based in pain. It's based in suffering. It's based in wounding. There's been a lot of wounding, and all of my family members have had their own story of really intense wounding from their own family lines. And so I see where it comes from. And I knew I was being called forth because I'd seen the example that my dad set. And also on my dad's deathbed, I promised him, I will love my mom unconditionally. I promise you.
Okay.
So over the 3 years, there were times I didn't know how I was going to do that. I almost quit. I was like, there's no way I can. She's just doing this and she's doing that and all of this stuff. But what I found in the writing of this book, this Love is Fierce and White Buffalo Calf woman coming to me to help me to work through these patterns and to open up even deeper to the earth, because I'd been working with the earth anyway for support for many years. But she helped me to open up even deeper and to really see that in some way, my attitudes and my lifelong beliefs about my mother and the story that I had formed about her in my own consciousness and my own mind in some way was something I could do something about, and that it might make a difference on the outside, but more importantly, it would make a big difference on the inside of me. So I let go of trying to change her, and I went in to change my own idea about who she was and about who I was. And I welcomed in this higher divine mother energy into my being to be my love for myself, to help me to love myself. And as I worked through this in so many stages, and the book has a lot of examples of the different aspects of things I looked at. I worked with plant medicine. I've worked with energy medicine. I've worked with just being with uncomfortable feelings and feel it to heal it. I've healed ancestral things. I've done a lot of work on it. At the end of the day, what ended up happening was I wrote, the final step was, and this is not in the book, but the final step is I wrote this goodbye letter to my mom. My mentor was like, just write a goodbye letter. Say everything you need to say and burn it. Just goodbye. I've done everything I can do. I love you. That's it. Mm-hmm. And I did that. I wrote the goodbye letter. I wrote everything. I was surprised at how many pages, double-sided, came out. Like I still had grudges. All of that I released as if she had passed away. Just like, okay, well, there's no more fighting this. So I'm just going to write the letter, like let her go. And then I went to Peru, as we talked about, and I worked with Wachuma, and I had this mystical experience on Wachuma where I connected to that deepest where the wound started, like the very start of that wound. And I brought love and compassion and healing to it. I welcomed God, Source, Creator into that space, into my whole existence. And I welcomed God, Source, Creator into the union of my parents and into my own birth. And this moment happened where I saw that root, and I saw it just like spiral, like smoke, just like that whole part, what I thought was my life just vanished. And when I came back, my mom was like, I want to get together. And I went to the lunch, and my older son was there, who's been staying with her, who the other piece of my puzzle, the other side of my challenge. He was there too. And my mom started the conversation and said, I'm the matriarch of this family, and I am telling every family member that we're starting over on a blank slate. We're starting fresh. And we will respect each other and love each other. An hour before that meeting, I'd been with my mentor group, and I made a cosmic claim. I said, I name and claim that I am the blank canvas for a new foundation of love for my family.
Wow. In those words.
Yes.
Wow. That's very interesting. That's a very, very spiritual kind of event. I mean, a lot of people might say, oh, well, but there are things like that happen, and you can't even write them.
Especially in a group. They all ratified it. They said, we see you. You are that. Yes, you are. And so it is.
Okay.
And here we are now, like we're having lunch again tomorrow, and she's learning about her gene keys, which is something she was never interested in before. She's like, I want to know about my gene keys. Will you teach me?
How old is your mother?
Okay. She's like 77.
Right. And so you did that work, and things are definitely improving now.
Yes. Yeah. And the thing is, when I was doing the work to make her be different, everything was stuck.
Sure. It has to be you. You can't change anything else, really. You
can't. But somehow when I changed me, that also changed.
Yeah, very strange.
But I couldn't do it because of that. So, because I kept trying to skirt the system, you can't. There's no skirting. Love is fierce. It is fierce to the point, exacting. So you can't do it because you want the other person to be different. It won't work.
Well, I want to believe that. I want to believe that by doing all of those things, you somehow triggered something in your mother and the people around you. And it was a divine kind of like connection. I can't explain. I'm pretty sure most people can't really explain quantum mechanics and things like that either. So there's a lot of stuff out there we don't understand, but that's really great. And I'm very happy about that. I'm very pleased to hear that. People listening might be wondering who this woman is, the white calf, the white buffalo calf woman. Who is that woman to you? Who was she? Was she a real woman, or was she like a symbol? And how does that work for you and for people who are doing, the things in your book?
Well, she's a legend. She's a
Right.
legend for the Lakota people. I have actually, this is my friend Catherine Skaggs made a
Right.
really beauthul soul
Nice.
portrait of her. So you
That's
can see the white
the picture you
buffalo.
reference in the book.
Yeah, I just love it. Catherine Skaggs does a good job with capturing through artwork these various goddesses and supporters. So she is what it says here, and I love this, is I'll just share from Catherine Skaggs. Invoke white buffalo calf women to teach you to revere spirit through the honoring of Mother Earth. She's all about the sacred flame of spirit. She's about the fire, and she's about ceremony, sacred ceremony, and working with ritual. So she reawakens you to work directly with the Divine Mother through your own heart and your own prayers and your own ceremony. Getting in, ceremony is about being in trance state, like outside of your logical brain, more in your heart and in the flow, like when you're listening to a drum journey, for example, shamanic drum journey, or you're listening to like music that puts you ethereally sort of out there, but also present in your body. Those trance states is the state you want to work with when you're working with the higher consciousness. So, we're all made of earth. We're in these, earth. We're in earth right now. So the earth is our teacher. If you consider that we're made of earth, she's our teacher because we're made of her. She knows everything about us. There's no thought that goes through you that she doesn't know. There's no emotion that goes through you that she doesn't know. Mm-hmm. She knows everything that's going on for you. And everything else on the planet too.
Right. I see where you're coming from. And this is again, this is the ancestral kind of wisdom, right? Coming through to guide us back to center somehow, to what's really important. And I think, I don't really know because I can't say, because you're obviously the author of the book and this is your skill set and your domain. But if someone is maybe finding it a bit difficult to make that leap and kind of welcome that into their lives, how could you recommend someone kind of get started with what it is that you're actually teaching in this book? Because I think it's very powerful. A lot of the information in there is really good.
Yeah, well, it's important I think, to be in community, because in community is a frequency field where we share the revelations of others. And in sharing the revelations of others, we experience the transformation from others. So in the Second Wave book, I'll just say this, the book I wrote before this is called The Second Wave. And in that book is a really excellent scientific explanation of how we change the world just by being ourselves and working on ourselves, by my friend and colleague, Jennifer Huff. But it talks about basically we are always radiating beams of light, just like photosynthesis, right? Like every other being alive radiates light. So the light that's radiating from you actually contains the codes of your consciousness and your awakening. So everything that you've integrated within your own consciousness bubble is always radiating out to other people. So when we're in community, we're radiating out, we're all doing a piece of the puzzle for each other. And so we're radiating and sharing our experience. So now on top of that, if you have a focus to the community of awakening, of connecting back, of embodying being a key word, embodying your divinity. That's key words to look for in a teacher or a community that you want to be with. A way to embody your divinity, because you're bringing your divinity, your higher consciousness, the invisible aspect of you, that light aspect of you, into the earth body, and merging with earth consciousness within you. That's how we uplift the whole planet. And the earth right now is raising her frequency. So we are all also, our frequencies are being raised whether we want it or not, because we're made of earth and we're on the earth. So to assist this process, if you sort of resist the process, then you're going to have suffering, because it's going to get sticky as you try to cling to that old branch and not swing to the next one like the monkey, right? Like you're going to get stuck. So fluidity is really important right now. And to get yourself over the fear of being fluid, be in community with other people who are doing it, to give your mind evidence that it's fine. When you see others succeed, your mind registers this is safe and it works.
Yeah. Yes. Peer group. We did a piece recently on the value of peer groups and the quality of the peer group too. I mean, we escape bad peers and we kind of welcome new peers, hopefully. Not always the case. That's why I think that kind of content is really important. And yes, you know, you've probably heard it before. You become who it is that you surround yourself with. I believe that to be 100% true. And we learn from other people. We learn through sharing as well. So I highly appreciate what you're saying. I think that's super, super important. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot in the book. There's so many, actually there was more than I thought. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. And it's very, it's packed full of information.
My friend Monica Rogers was like, we need to have a highlighting party. Apparently you can highlight segments that you like and share it on social media directly from the Kindle. And she did it the other day. And I was like, she's like, let's have a highlighting party.
Oh, nice. Yeah, you can do that. Cool. Yeah. There's a lot of, nice. What fascinates me is that you've broken down the different chapters into these kind of bite-sized chunks, right? But they're all, I would say, very different from one another. And yeah, so it's kind of like you're getting a piece of many different things in one book. You talk about things like codependency, sovereignty, and interdependency. Like you talk about nonviolent communication and diplomacy. All of these kinds of micro, I guess, facets of having a more connected, better relationship with yourself and the people around you. What would you say in the book is something that people, if they were going to go away from this conversation with something of value, what would it be that from the book that they could get?
Love is fierce, meaning that love is just as much as love is fierce in terms of bringing you to your own knees, so to speak, and surrendering to your higher power. It also is fierce in a sense that it never gives up on you. Like love is not giving up on anybody. Nobody's getting left behind. Everybody is going. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, well, okay, these people are chosen and they're going to go and everybody else is going to get left behind. No, it's like love will stay present for every single aspect of the overall consciousness to be lifted to the new level of consciousness that we're being lifted to here. And the doorway is open for that. Now you can still stubbornly resist it if you want, and love holds space for that. I mean, think about the awesome power of the divine and the tremendous grace that it has to allow each of us down to the tiniest little ant, that we're just like this little speck in the universe. The power of this great presence to say, you can say no to me if you desire. Wow. That's potent. Mm-hmm. And why would you want to say no to something as wonderful as love? Why would you want to say no?
I know. I think it goes back to that kind of pattern that you were talking about earlier, which it's like a kind of like an energy, isn't it? It's like you're resonating with a certain energy. When you feel angry about something, you just want to keep the anger going. Somehow it kind of gives you some identity or some justification. And okay, I remember when I was younger, I was with a lovely woman and we would go to, she would go to, I wanted to go, I never actually went, but she would tell me about these visits she would make to a local charity, a local church charity, that was basically called the Listening Corner, I think. And you'd basically you'd sit with someone who was clearly going through something, and they were, all encouraged to come and just talk. And my girlfriend would just sit there and listen. That was the job, just listen to them. And I think it did a lot of good, but she would see the same people coming back all the time, just saying the same things. Oh, I hate this. This is what's going wrong for me. I'm so depressed. I want to give up. And it would be the same thing over and over again. And they weren't allowed to suggest anything, which I think there are times when, a suggestion is not so bad, is it? So I think they were kind of resonating on that frequency, and they were getting that validation, that identity, and it was building. So I would like to think that in reference to what you said about love is not leaving anyone behind, it's always there, it's always available, the door's open. Yeah, I believe that 100%. You can change your state in an instant. You just have to decide. But getting to that decision, that's a mountain to climb. If you look at it from one perspective, you've got to physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, you've got to recognize that it's actually there in front of you and it exists. And I don't think a lot of people do know that. They think it's gone. They think it is,
but it's right here. Back to your girlfriend and what she was doing. I think a really important step, and as a healer, I know that most of what I'm doing is listening. I'm listening, whole body listening, because I'm an empathic healer. So I'm whole body listening to someone. But what I'm doing is I'm actually seeing them in their divinity as I'm listening to them. So that's the added step, I would say. And there's a phrase that I learned from one of my teachers, the Power Path on healing. There's this phrase I learned that said, "All is sacred as am I." All is sacred as am I. So if we're listening to somebody, but actually thinking, gosh, this person is so irritating. They just keep coming in every single week and talking the same thing, and they're not making any progress. And that's really frustrating. And I feel frustrated right now. If that's the listening that's happening on the listener's end, that's what's being received. But if you're like, all is sacred as am I, that means that this whole experience of this person complaining about their life is completely sacred. Now we've elevated the entire, do you feel that? It's lifting. It's like the whole thing is lifted now. It's like, this is not even the same. So we just invited the divine into this conversation. All is sacred as am I. All is sacred as is this person in front of me that thinks they're having this experience. But I know better. I know who they really are in truth. And this is where I love to bring in, for anybody who wants to experience being uplifted by unseen ascended masters, is Paul Selig. I love Paul Selig's work, Selig. He wrote the I Am the Word book. So for any recovering Christians who are like, gosh, I can't stand Christianity, I Am the Word is really helpful because it actually goes direct to source about the concepts, and everything makes so much sense. It's like when you hear truth, you remember it. When you hear truth, it gets in there. Truth penetrates. So when you hear truth, you remember, and the lies, they have to go away now because you're like, oh, that's the truth. Of course, that's so true. You just know it. So that's what that book does. And so what I would say is that as we become the truth more and more and more, and of course, this is a layered process, but as each of us does our personal work to become the truth of ourselves, of who we all are in truth, part of this, one aspect, one little facet of this giant disco ball, we become that truth. We remind everybody else, not by telling them, because, that's the whole Bible verse on like pearls before swine. If you tell the ego something, the ego is going to be like, yeah, whatever, I'm going to tell you no. But if you just silently bring in, I am love through the one I see before me, all is sacred as am I. If you bring the divine into it and you offer it, at some level, they are uplifted. And when they get out of that density, because it's like a density. So when they lift out of the density, the sun starts to shine, and it's like, oh, there's more going on here. And then the density lifts. Oh, it's like, oh, now I can take a step. Right. Yeah. So the work we're doing is lifting, actually. And the earth is lifting. We're those of us like you and me and the other messengers out podcasts and everybody listening here, we're lifting the whole plane, the whole matrix. And as we lift, other people will lift enough that they get out of the density, they can take a step. Because it's kind of like they've got lead weights on their feet. It is hard to take a step.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until now.
I remember reading once, I think it might have been in A New Earth, which is an Eckhart Tolle book. And
yes,
I read that it really does have to be like a critical mass of consciousness for us to really kind of get out of this horrible mess that we're in, where we're very selfish or greedy, or, we don't help each other as much as we could or should. So I can get behind that. I agree with that. Your son, you mentioned your son a few times. Does your son follow in your footsteps? Is he practicing these things as well with you?
My older son is well, let's say he as you probably know from the book, but he went through the whole power path training at 18 to 19 to 20, right? So kind of in that frame. I think he was 19 when he started. So 19, 20. He's 21 now. So but he chose not to graduate. And part of me was really disappointed in that, because I was like, wow, you went through a whole year but you didn't graduate. Why didn't you do that? And I did a ceremony the night before. I didn't know he wasn't going to graduate. And he kind of, he came into it was a medicine journey with some mushrooms. And I did this journey. I was on, I was in this space where he was supposed to be graduating. And I thought, he came into my ceremony psychically. He was there. And he kind of flourished his cape, like a wizard, and he's just like, I'll get there when I get there. We all know where we're going. Don't rush me. And he's told me before, don't unwrap my present. This is my present. I'm unwrapping it. It's my life.
He's literally told you that before.
He's literally told me that, like, stop trying to unwrap my present for me,
Yeah.
Because he's an old soul. He wants to experience it. So anyway, yeah. So he seems to be, because he chose out of his own accord. So he is interested, and there's some friction with me, obviously, being on the path with him. So there's still some stuff we're working out. But he's on his journey. He's a brilliant person. And he's in his discovery. He's 21. His brain's not fully formed. We know that for a fact. That's not an insult to him at all, because we all know that brains are
right. Yeah.
brains are not formed until like 30, all the way. So it's not an insult. It's just, he's just working with what he's got,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, we can't really, when I was 21, I mean, I still don't know anything, but when I was 21, I knew even less. And I think we need don't you think we all need the full length of our lives to really get it? I mean, we're
getting it one piece at a time. Yeah. I'm still learning too.
Right.
I mean, my brain's probably not still fully formed either.
I don't remember who it was, but someone said, it's perfection doesn't exist, but we try to get there closer every day. It's like we learn things, we get better at things. We love the idea of perfection, but we'll never get there because it doesn't exist, but we somehow get closer. And I think that's the mission of life, is just to improve in every possible way, as a person, as a mother, as a brother, and just make the most of it. That's the joy. But I think it's a real pleasure having you on the show, and you've said so much. It was very much not what I was expecting to talk about. I thought we were going to go through your book bit by bit, but
yeah, well, there's a mystery. People can get the book and they can read the book. Can I offer you one little reframe on the perfection? Because my gene key, my purpose gene key, is actually moves from judgment. So boy, I've been in the shadow of judgment for a good part of my life. So judgment to the gift of integrity, which is really more about like, the integrity of something. It's strength, it's inner strength, it's integrity, it's form, it's function.
What is a
and
gene
into
key?
the city of perfection. So the gene keys are aligned with the human design chart. So if you've ever done your human design integrates many systems. It integrates the I Ching, it integrates astrology and several other systems into one system of understanding yourself, and it's highly accurate. The gene keys are an aspect of the human design that are fascinating, and they're like little doorways to understand your soul's curriculum that you signed up for in this lifetime, the things you came to understand about yourself. So one of mine is and the things that we come to understand, of course, are the things we end up becoming in service to the collective about. So for example, your Dharma. So your Dharma attracts your karma. So everything that is your Dharma lesson you came here to learn, now you attract those things to you so you can learn it, which becomes your karma. And then as you work through the karma of it, you end up claiming the gifts and you move into the highest expression, which is called the city. And then at that place, you're in service to the collective to help others uplift that aspect of the human genome, that gene key. So one of my purpose is to help with judgment and lifting it through integrity into perfection. Now, here's an interesting thing I've realized up until now, and I'm not saying I'm complete in my inquiry because I'm only 51 and I got a lot of life left. So we'll see what happens in the next 50 years. But perfection, I've learned, is we are always perfecting, right? We're refining, we're tuning, we're learning, we're adjusting, we're exploring, and it's all perfect. Like it's always perfect. Every moment is exactly perfect. Every lesson is exactly perfect. Every relationship is exactly perfect. It's all perfectly orchestrated and designed. And that doesn't mean like just sit back on your haunches and don't do nothing. Like that's not really the advice. It's just realize that it's all perfectly aligned. And it's moving to a new perfectly aligned place. It's moving to a new perfectly aligned place, and a new one and a new one and a new one, because we're evolving.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. I think, definitely. It is a challenge of words. Like this is coming full circle to the beginning of the conversation where you have to be a master of your language. And I think...
Yes, be impeccable with your word. We're learning this.
Yeah.
Me too.